the experience for me was amazing, not just creatively, but as a life experience, to go and spend that quality of time with these people and in that place. I mean, we were in Chingasa. Is this on? Can you hear me?
You can take it.
All right. Chingasa National Park.
Chingasa, that's a bad word.
Probably.
Chingasa.
That happened a lot.
I'm Alejandro Landes, and thanks. Well, this is going to be kind of anticlimactic because I don't really like to talk before a movie. Más fuerte. Más fuerte. How's that? Sorry, I'm a little nervous. Yeah, this is going to be a little anticlimactic, not only because it's a little low, but I don't really like to talk before a film. I think they gotta talk for themselves. But I do want to say that, you know, this is incredibly exciting for everyone who's put so much body, soul, sweat, tears, everything into this film, which is a real ride. It was a beast to make, a real roller coaster, and hopefully you'll live it that way. There's a lot of very special people here that made this film with me, and they're going to be here at the end to talk to you. And it's going to be very exciting, so please, I'd love to talk to you afterwards. So I want to thank you all for coming here, wish you a real ride, and let you know that we just opened in Colombia a couple weeks ago, and the US is our first theatrical release after that. We open on Fridays in movie theaters, and this is our premiere, so thank you all for being here. And with that, bon voyage.
Everybody, please give a big applause to the director, Alejandro Landes.
I'd like to introduce Doctora, Julianne Nicholson.
Well, so it's a pleasure for me to have this opportunity, and I think for you to have an opportunity to know exactly how this film came together. It's an stunning, heartbreaking film in every sense for me. I saw it, I have the opportunity to see it like 4 weeks ago. And I felt the film was earthy, was sensorial, make me feel cold, make me feel every sense was completely awakened, and everything was unexpected, but at the same time inevitable, and universal, with no understanding, impenetrable, but at the same time logic. So anyway, we have so many things to talk about. I would like to first ask you, Alejandro, how this film came together in the first place. What was the seed that came before anything?
It's a tough one. I think the film comes from a lot of places. One is, of course, Colombia, my country that has gone through a civil war of 60 years or so. And the irregular nature of that conflict makes me think of war as my generation experiences war today, as opposed to war by our grandparents, right? Those more clean lines, if you will, the front lines that exist in a World War I and World War II. Now war, and we see it in the Middle East, seems to be all being fought from the back lines, right? Shadow wars, wars that happen clandestinely for reasons we're not sure why. They don't necessarily have a clear beginning or an end. And that the nature of that irregular war made me think that a war film told from the point of view of a country like Colombia, but was something that I felt I hadn't seen and was necessary. And the idea was to create a mirror between this exterior conflict and the conflict of adolescence. Is a time in everyone's life where your body changes, you want to belong, but at the same time you want to be alone. You know, hair comes out in places, the timbre of your voice changes. And so that conflict, and I felt that was something that, I don't know, appealed to me on a very instinctive level.
Where'd that come from?
Well, we actually stole from a lot of rebel armies, from the right or the left, also uniforms with a production designer, and that one has specifically come from a leftist guerrilla group in Colombia.
Because something that I was really impressed to was that by taking the context of everything, that you don't understand exactly if they are right or left, if they are Maoist, communist, you don't know exactly even which period of time is, and what is exactly the Doctora kind of role was. I mean, is money, is a political hostage. I mean, there is no context at all, and that is what makes it fascinating, because then I think we fill the blanks. And then obviously kids, that it seems that by all the things that you never, I felt that I never saw how they were indoctrinated or brainwashed, but the instructions of that kind of colonel were completely, I understood that they have been obviously fundamentally changed politically, as most of the kids are now ideologized around the world. You can call it religiously, politically, whatever. And I think that's what makes it universal. I think anybody can. That was a decision that you took from the beginning. So that you did not want to take any line of.
Well, I was very inspired on allegories and a sort of this idea of a fairy tale. I mean, you have like Conrad's Heart of Darkness, you have Golden's Lord of the Flies. You have these political allegories that ask these existential questions. That was the idea always. Because people latch on to kind of very binary concepts, right? You're fighting for the left or you're fighting for the right. You're anti-communist or you're communist. You're good or evil, future, past, hell or paradise. And the idea was to navigate this gray, so you would force to latch on to the humanism of the, let's say, present moment, instead of the prejudices of, let's say, a first name and a last name. That's why all the characters even have aliases. And you don't know if the character of Doctora is a CIA operative or an NGO worker. And I don't think one deserves to be kidnapped more than the other necessarily, right? And that was the idea, to force you into the trenches, not into some ideology that makes you feel more comfortable because you know.
And another thing that really got my attention is that you make a decision that was for me very powerful. As you said, there is no binary kind of values. Like the kids are still kids sexually. I think they never lose their innocence. They cry. They can feel for the other, as Rambo for the Doctora. I mean, I think there's a lot of emotions, or that scene where you have with the girl, which is amazing, that kissing before, after the bomb, and then this kind of reaction that comes from a very primal kind of emotions. That exploration, that minimalistic but very profound and deep emotional thing on the context of war and violence, and not making glamorization of the violence, which in a way violence is just the background of it, but you never come. I think there's something that I love about the way you explore violence, which violence has a consequence, and there's a human nature that is attached to it, but not in a stupid or entertaining, funny, funky way, but in a very real way, and tender at the same time, right?
Well, I'm really excited by what Julianne is able to portray in the character Doctora after taking such a big decision, which is killing a little girl to recuperate her liberty. And you see the effects on the violence on the victimizer. And many times in films today, you see someone come in, blow up a building, kill 1,000 people, there's not even a bead of sweat. Whereas here, you really see the effects on the soul of this character when she's taken a life. I mean, she's not ecstatic that she's found her liberty. She really feels the weight of that. And you can see that when she decides whether to take Smurf or not. And even on the character of Bigfoot, I think the ability to have this lust for power, but also a desire to be loved, would sometimes go hand in hand.
I would like to ask you from your perspective, I would like to ask both of you, how you arrived at those characters, and obviously those places looks incredibly difficult to shoot, you know, like from the cold of that mountains and then the jungle. So you know, you feel exactly what you were going through. But I would like to hear from you first. How was the workshop? How you arrived to these characters that you represented? How was the experience for you as an actress?
The experience for me was amazing, not just creatively, but as a life experience, to go and spend that quality of time with these people and in that place. I mean, we were in Chingasa. Is this on? Can you hear me?
Well, you can take this one.
All right. Chingasa National Park.
Chingasa, that's a bad word.
Probably.
Chingasa.
That happened a lot. It was 12,000 feet up, so there was altitude. I've never felt such a cold, even though it may not be the number that was, you know, showing, but it was wet and cold and high altitude, and the weather changed every minute. We were so uncomfortable all the time. And then in the jungle, it was, you know, terrible and beautiful every day. From LA, I took 2 planes to Medellin, and then you drive for 3 hours on a paved road, 1 hour on a dirt road. Then you hike for an hour downhill. You could take a donkey. I opted to walk. And then you're on a raft for an hour. And then, you know, where the 2 rivers meet, and there's that body of land in the middle, that was our camp. That's where we were. So every time I see that, I feel taken back there. And it was just an incredible, deeply uncomfortable, but incredible experience.
No fancy trailers, nothing like that.
No, I had a tent. I had a tent, and it rained every single night from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. torrential downpour and lightning and thunder every single night.
So that's a genius method of acting that you use. Put everybody to a mental act without choosing.
Everybody was kidnapped.
Yeah.
Just really put us in the situation, you know what I'm saying? Like, it'd be different to be able to go to a room and drink coffee and you know, discuss with the actor like what we're about to do next, but it was really like go from the set in the jungle to your plastic you know, guerrilla style tent that you shared with 14 kids. And in the jungle it was really our body temperatures that really kept us warm. I got to capture a couple photographs, and I got a really nice one of Pitufo, Doctora, and Rambo. Really hugged together, trying to survive drinking hot chocolate. So, I mean, it was, you know, to get to that point, we also went through a really tough training process before shooting the film, and you know, I was up for it. I was down, and there was a couple people that just couldn't get with it. We started with what, 15, 20 kids, and ended up being 8 or 9 of us. The toughest one of us, really. Yeah. During that training process was also the acting camp, because none of these kids were actors, and really me and Julianne were the only people that had scripts, and we really had to, I guess, act, not as an actor, but actually do things and have them respond as well.
These workshops, Alejandro, that you create, that you told me that you did 800 people, you saw something like that, and then you went to the workshops. How much you knew about the characters before you got the kids that were with you, and then how much you discovered through these workshops to, in a way, give them like the arc of who they were. Like each of them, which I love the nicknames, by the way. You know, it's they have a very strong personality and very defined thing. How much it was written, how much you discovered through the process.
It's really both. I mean, it was really those two rivers meeting in a way, because the screenplay was developed fully for every single one of those characters. But after seeing over 800 kids all over Colombia and bringing about 25 of them to this sort of mock boot camp of sorts, and in the morning they would do acting and improv exercises with little pieces of the screenplay that they didn't know was the screenplay, they just thought it was acting exercises. And then in the afternoon they did this sort of military and physical training, but not the typical boot stomping that you would see in a regular army. They had to act like a shadow army. And after seeing them in this very intense day-to-day routine, you would see in this mini group, this mini society, you would see who likes who flirts with who hates who fights. And we started rewriting in those weeks, trying to make sure that we can bring them and what we found out about them into the screenplay. And that's how we chose the 8 that would be the MONOS in the end. Because that was a big thing, having 8, let's say, protagonists that have to represent the spirit of the group. And in the end, it wasn't just about how each one of them performed individually, but about their chemistry. So that rewriting process during that boot camp was key to make each character kind of come alive.
How the physicality of the scenes and the camera movements and obviously the conditions of those rivers and those mountains, I think it needs to rehearse, like, technically, obviously, all those movements and all those camera movements and all those things were absolutely trained on site, or you in the workshop you train and then you adapted that to the physicality of that? Because I know how precise has to be that, because obviously you expose people to dangers. How was that?
There was some danger.
I can imagine. But it was improvised danger, or you rehearse and then obviously the danger that implies. Because there's a very strong, obviously, choreography in terms of the actors and the camera. Obviously, everything is synchronized. So I imagine that you rehearse those kind of things in advance.
We rehearsed some, but more than anything, we had a very intense and developed shot list. I worked with a DP, a Dutch DP called Jasper Wolf. It was the first time we worked together, and we really went through that screenplay as I rewrote and really created that shot list from beginning to end, because we knew the conditions were going to be very rough. And not only rough, but they change on a dime. As Julianne said, you go from sun to thunderstorm in a second, in the mountain, fog, sun, rain. And so we had very little time, but the idea was, of course, to give it this fabulesque and the controlled kind of camera language that it has. We had to, really have it down pat in our minds. We didn't have that much time with the camera because we didn't also have the money to have a camera there during pre-production. But as much as we could, we rehearsed.
There's some scenes that are really haunting me. Like, I love that scene. Not really the one with the girl that I told you, that kissing scene. That was something. It seems that it came almost like that, but it was a rehearsing that it was prepared with a lot of attention and detail.
I don't think, did we rehearse that? I think we talked about it, and we did a lot of discussion about what it was and what was happening. And it was very tricky because she doesn't speak a word of English and I don't speak Spanish, so there was a lot of translating and then just when you get in those elements, it informs so much.
I remember that there was a container on the mountain. Remember that?
Yes.
One container. So I took the character of Sweden and threw her into that container, and had them come up close. And I'm so happy with the magic that they created. That's one we rehearsed a lot before. I remember before going down into the tunnel.
No, but Julianne is so right with the elements around you. Like once you're in the room, once you're in that space, it really helps for you to not have to imagine the cold, the difficulty, the tension,
Yeah.
The smoke was there, the explosion had just happened, the heart might be racing, and it just helps to respond then.
And that, although it seems like, for example, the one that we are dancing, that's a very powerful scene too, I think. I don't know if that was something that were accidents that happened, but it's a very powerful one.
I remember it. I think when they were having a party upstairs, and you just said that you wanted to see that. Alejandro wanted to see life that was happening inside that cell. And another thing that I love that I don't know if people notice is that he wanted me, as we went, he had me draw on the walls with charcoal so that you could see the progression of time. So it was my own hand. It wasn't a production designer in there creating this thing, but me spending time like, what would I want if this is where I was? What would I want to bring? What would I want to look at on these walls? And I thought that was such a wonderful idea. And then just trying to fill that space with life. Like, what do you do in there for 24 hours a day?
And Julianne actually had read several books by people that had been kidnapped, and it is not uncommon. It actually happens that many times, and not only in Colombia, in other countries, the high command will negotiate the kidnapping, but then for the day-to-day custodian and guards, they give it to the lowest rung of the ladder. And who are they? Many times they're the youngest soldiers, and many times they're kids. And kids can be cruel, as anyone else. And so I remember that's also some training she did. But Julianne absolutely hated that room. Right?
I fucking hated it. The blankets were always wet. Everything was wet, and cold. And I was just like, ah!
But I remember that dancing scene was we just basically, you were there alone in that room, and the camera was at the threshold of the door, and I think we had a take of just maybe the camera was running for at least 10 minutes, and we were just trying different things, and I was whispering to her, and Julianne was just riffing, just really making it happen.
It's like, move when you're stuck in a place and you just want to move. Like, what does that look like? And then like, that's for me, I guess, what it looks like.
What was for you the most difficult scene for you?
The most difficult scene. I mean, there's no question that the rap was the craziest thing I've done in my life.
How was that?
You know, we had done the trenches scene, which was torture as well, because I was completely wet, and you know, it was right after shrooms, so it was a lot of chaos and explosions and stuff.
I thought shrooms was the hardest. You'd never done that before.
Yeah, of course. But once we got on these rafts with professional kayakers in Colombia, and they took us to the rapids, Alejandro was like, all right, you good? And Rambo had just done hers first. And she was like, they're throwing you in there, nothing on.
Yeah.
Don't let them.
You were in conspiracy theory.
You know, we had a safety technique. It was thumbs up and a rope. That was it. Alejandro really just threw us in there and captured it. And at least Rambo had done a test run for me.
Well, I think there's another thing that I really love about your film is this film has a language that honestly, for example, when you kill the girl in the river, for example, which is a tough scene, I think to perform and to shoot, the fact that you just go to the feet of her, you know what I mean, that you don't get to the blood or the head crash, which is the classic entertaining now cool thing, but no, it's just the feet, which is, or even the bubbles.
Yeah.
That bubbles in the river at the end are so beautiful. Maybe I don't know, camera was rolling there, you discovered that thing. I don't know if you planned it or not, but it's just such a magical thing that just brings you so many emotions with bubbles. So that cinematic language really, I really valorate in the times we are living, which everything is so obvious. So there's an incredible language. Another thing that I want to ask you, because it's remarkable, is the music. How that music works, because I think she's amazing. She's one of my favorite musicians. But I think that the design and every kind of sound is haunting. And can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think in both cases, both with the visual language and with the music, it was the first time I felt like I really wanted to flirt with genre. And so you have to find a new way to discover that. So at least initially that whistle, which was the first musical note, the one you hear at the beginning, that came almost from a spaghetti western desire. And we wanted to find something that would be a play with that notion of time, something ghostly. So basically you have the juxtaposition of very primal sounds like Mika Levy, our great British composer, just blowing into a bottle. And then many times you have more classical strings within a quarteto, and at times you have something that is coming straight out of a synthesizer, straight out of what could be like a Berlin nightclub, like an injection of adrenaline. And there's only 22 minutes of music in the film, but the idea is that when it comes in as a character, and it helps the emotional cues. So for example, the messenger, which is the character that represents this authority, the organization, whenever he appears, there's a very shrill whistle. And that gives you that sort of Peter and the Wolf idea where every character has their musical note. And that was like a big thing to play, that both time and I guess narrative.
It's another thing that, did you shot in film or in digital?
Digital.
Digital. And what about the lighting there? That you have a lot of, have all, especially in the first part of it. How was that?
Follow the light, basically. We really
mostly natural light.
Yeah, a lot of natural light, a lot of following the light, and at first, the light changes so much up there that at first I'm like, why? And then I'm just like, okay, why not? Let's do it. Let's bring it in. Let's make it happen. And that's how it was. We had some lights, but we had a very limited budget, and also the idea was not to be beholden to a big crew. And follow the light, and really, that's what kind of guided the shoot the light.
I think every department, every single decision that you made too. I think the wardrobe was something that really got my attention. The design of that wardrobe of each of the characters is absolutely fantastic, and there's a lot of look in the obsession in the detail. About the how wet. Maybe it was a great normal and real wet, but how dirty it was, how all those things really look and smell, and all that things really got my attention in the powerful detail observation that you have.
Well, to be able to create this sort of imaginary rebel army, but give it a lot of specificity, intimacy, we looked at all sorts of rebel groups. So we even looked at some modern uniforms, like the ones that Russia used to go into Crimea and supposedly no one knew they were there. So like those, and then we looked at even Rastafari rebel movements, and that Bigfoot had the Rastas.
I thought for my hair, you wanted to shave my head.
So we looked with the production designer at all sorts of different rebel groups coming from the right or the left to try to build this kind of army.
And what about the editing? I mean, how difficult it was to edit the film? Because obviously there's so many moments that you have some elliptical kind of things, and you take chances to not really give the people all the context, all the information. You again, even visually, you are stripping context, but at the same time you are filling blanks, and you leave people, you trust in your audience to be feeling what's going on, and not explaining things that are obvious. So in the editing, in a way, you create that puzzle.
I mean, editing was really tough on this one, but fortunately, my editor's still alive, and he's around here. Ted Gard, where is he? Ted. Thank you. Well, I mean, it was hard because we had this notion in the edit, and the idea that the film would be shaped like a river, and the mountain is shot in this highland, this wetland that is really the reservoir of Colombia's water. And it starts trickling down the mountain and gets faster and faster and faster until it ends up in the lowlands. And of course it loses that transparency from where the water is born. Let's say in this that you see here, actually, these are wetlands, but they're at 13,000 feet up in the air. And the idea was that you would follow this very winding river that would change different speed. And it was a great idea, but to make that work in the edit when you're changing point of view with all the different characters was a tough one to find, because there was very little margin for error, because you're not on the shoulders of one character, one hero, if you will, or heroine. And so that was tough. And also from the screenplay, you had those big elliptical jumps that I was eager for you to feel, that kind of gave the film that kind of fantastic quality, kind of pushing the limit of the physical world almost to the point it becomes fantastical. Like the character of Doctora moves the plastic, and all of a sudden you're in the jungle, all that far away. And that makes you think of when you're a kid and you're in a tent in your backyard and you think you can open and you'll be in an African safari or something. And so those were those jumps we wanted to do to allow the imagination of the viewer. It's a very powerful thing, imagination, like dreams. And so we want to make sure that happens.
And that location is a star. So I mean, the first location is just outstanding. Because I mean, that foggy kind of Tarkovskian fog all the time present is just. I have never seen such an amazing location. I think that's one of the heart of the thing, right? That they are in heaven in a way, heaven and hell at the same time for me.
Exactly.
And I think that how you found that location, is that something that you discovered, or you were looking for something like that?
Yeah, I was looking everywhere because the idea was you wouldn't have a date or the name of a place to latch onto, so you wanted to have a place that physically it has a lot of specificity, that you can remember those towers that you see there, that they latch onto your memory, because you're not going to have a name of a city, like, oh, Chicago or something. And so we looked, and then I heard about this place, and while walking around, I saw the hole, like a rabbit hole, and it ended up being a closed bunker for an old cement mine that used to be here before this place became a national park. So we ventured with a flashlight into this place, and we found this huge underground bunker, and it was like a gift.
Amazing. I think one of the toughest things that I think, as you were saying, there's so many characters and so many points of view, that temptation that you have sometimes, that you get in love with more character, or somebody can give you more. But I think you really balance very well, because in a way you feel for the Doctora, but you feel for Bigfoot, and you feel for Dog, and you feel for everybody has, obviously, and you are all the time navigating through everybody without giving or supporting just one point of view, which is a very strong, and you are not separated at the same time. You are not objective. In a way, you are balancing that act. That was something that you planned in the beginning, or in the editing was the toughest thing to decide. When you have the material already, and then you can make some choices and make the film about somebody or a couple.
No. Basically, in the screenplay, it was always as you see it now. I mean, the idea of that multiplicity of point of view, for that to flow like a sort of river, like a pinball machine in a way. You don't know who you're going to be with, and that was the bet of the screenplay. It was hard, and then we had to make it work in the edit, make sure that worked, because I said there's no margin of error, particularly because you have the squad leader is dead in minute 18 or 19 or so, and then you have to follow someone else, and in the end Rambo starts appearing right towards the end, and you leave. And that was the idea of the name MONOS, because there's different, in Spanish, different countries, it can be blonde, it can be cute, it can be monkey, but MONOS for me actually comes from the Greek, the prefix mono, for one, and of course the film is that tension between your aloneness and the group, and that tension between being one and being in the group is, I think, what we all experience as human beings on this planet. And that was the idea, for you to feel that in that mini society, because what you should latch on to here is the spirit of this small group of people.
Even the cow has a very good that idea, where that comes from, about somebody killing a cow. It's
fable again. I think I thought that was, and also it comes from the connection, I guess, in warfare, that you have to, a rebel group has to be good with the civil population. That's how you win. If not, you don't have their support, and that's a very key thing. And also, I felt that it would seem such a simple, almost fatalistic thing that detonates this whole thing, which is a cow dying in an accident, and then and look whatever happens. It's almost like chaos theory, like a butterfly flaps its wings, and then at the other end of the world, there's a typhoon.
How many days of shooting was?
9 weeks.
9 weeks. Dividing the two, half and half.
Exactly. But the real heart of the shoot, let's say, were those 4 weeks of pre-production with them doing these exercises, and that's how we found the messenger. The messenger was initially my military consultant, because he is actually someone who deserted a rebel group when he was 24. He entered as a child soldier. He was 11, and he fought in one of the most feared combat units of a guerrilla army. And I met him in a reinsertion program for people that have laid down their arms and trying to get back into society. And he came in to try to train the kids on how to move like a clandestine fighter. And he was so convincing, he was so amazing, that in the end I was like, no, you need to come on this side of the camera. And that's what happened.
He was scared. He was amazing.
Yeah.
He was scared?
I think he was, I think it made him very nervous, to actually speak on camera, to be acting was not what he was expecting.
Yeah, and what's amazing is that he said, I've learned all these things since I'm 11, and I've become I was incredibly good at destruction. And the idea that now I'm using these exact same things for creation was something that really, he couldn't believe that he was doing this. Because this is someone that when he held the camera to shoot a proof of life video for Julianne, let's just say that wasn't the first time he's done this.
Wow. It was funny that everybody was shouting. He shouts all the time. Everybody was like, I love it. Is your first? Was your first Spanish film in Spanish?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Will you return?
Yes, I hope so.
You live here, right? And it was your first film in Colombia?
That was my first Spanish film. I think I did a short film with my brother, and Santiago, who produced the film, had seen it, and also he saw something in Kings. I'm supposed to be Italian, but I just come out speaking Spanish, and he's like, "Oh my God, that's a Colombian accent." So yeah, I got sent the script, and like Alejandro said, everything was on the page. I've said this before, but I didn't respond in email faster than this in this project. I thought that it was really special from the go.
Absolutely fantastic. Well, I really think that it's an stunning film. I was so refreshed, so inspired, so happy when I saw it, and so impacted that I'm so pleased to be here with you tonight, guys. What an extraordinary work of everybody